Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Meta Update. My name is Joshua Joshi Howard, and today we're going to be talking about what has been happening over the past week or so of 40k in terms of competitive GT play. Just a quick heads up, I do have the schniffles, so if you do hear me like anything like that, just know I'm a tiny bit sick. I've been getting a lot sicker this year than I have in a lot of previous years, so hopefully this will be the last one for the year, but we'll see how it goes. So starting off with what we're looking at overall with the meta snapshot, we had I believe it was 43 players. It was like mid 40s number of players with 89 wins, 95 losses, and 12 draws for an overall win rate of 48.5%. I forgot to update the notes here, but I will reiterate: don't let your friends play Leave and Rust Commanders. It's not really a good unit. We did see an interesting uptick. I think we have definitely hit the part of the edition where people are just really bored with playing combined arms. We've been seeing a lot of people just playing things that are not combined arms. It was a lot of, just like last week where we saw a lot of people playing things that weren't combined, this week we also saw a lot of people that weren't combined. But we weren't seeing a lot of the more exotic stuff. There was a pretty normal amount of siege, but I don't think there was a single bridgehead list this last weekend. At least I don't remember seeing one. But yeah, the other big thing that we're kind of seeing is we're seeing a lot of people kind of branching out a little bit with the armies that they're playing, and we'll come back to that in a bit. Overall, we did have a higher average elo playing, and despite the fact that we had 43 players, we have 11 lists today, and not a single one of them is a teams list. Unfortunately, there were a couple big events. I think they were in Spain, I want to say, and then there was a one or two more. One of them was in, I think it was Australia or New Zealand, but unfortunately none of the players there managed to hit the 1600 elo benchmark, which is what we use, of course, to talk about teams lists. Anyway, I did put this in a little bit of an order. We're going to talk about the stuff that is not as innovative, not as new at the beginning, and then we'll start talking about some of the more interesting things later on in the slideshow. So to start off, me. That's right, I got a GT win this last weekend. The reason why I'm first is one, it's me, and two, I didn't do anything new. This is about as like normal of a guard list as I think you can really look at. I got first place overall at Mugu Games, going 5-0. I brought a Caning Command Squad, Gonskos, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, Sly Marbo, Ursula Creed, 1 unit of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 20 Death Corps of Krieg, 3 Chimeras, 3 Kazarkin, 1 Luminous Exterminator, and 2 Scout Sentinels. The biggest thing that's like interesting about this list is the fact that it has Sly Marbo in it. Big reason for this is the entire event was being played on Games Workshop Layout 1 and Games Workshop Layout 4, which means that, well, you can stand in cover on the objectives, right? You can make it so that most of the saves you're taking are going to be with cover. You are not able to stand on these objectives basically at all without getting shot. So having that little extra lone operative character to just run around, do a couple secondaries, just be lone op on these objectives. If I go first and have to push past the objectives, I will still have something lone operative on the objective to just stand on it if I need to. Other than that, not a whole lot new about this. The one other thing I'll kind of say, I'm a really big fan of this 20 Cadian unit. I haven't had a lot of chance to experiment with the, like, I've been calling it the Gustavo bricks, but the Castellan Cadian Command Squad, 20 Cadians, and an optional Ogrim Bodyguard. I will hopefully be doing some experimentation with that over the next couple of days. So, you'll hear more from me about that. Other than that, this is about as close to just like a guard good stuff list as I think you can get. Yeah, not a whole lot new to say about this. Ended up going 5-0. I played up against Tyranids, Dark Angels, Orcs again, and Chaos Space Marines in the finals. If you are interested in hearing more about that, I will be putting out a video probably tomorrow or the day after. We'll see exactly how much work I'm going to be putting in today on this YouTube stuff. Next, we have Hive City Rumble, second place coming out from Duncan Blum, a player that we have definitely seen pop up on the spreadsheet. I don't know if I've done videos. I kind of lost track on what players have managed to get into the videos because Duncan has been in plenty of the spreadsheets beforehand. And this is, again, it's a little bit of a hybrid. I believe it was Neil Burns Morales that last week that had a very similar list to this one, and Duncan having a 4-1 performance with it as well, only losing in the finals to Admech. But it was Gonskos, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, Ursa Creed, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 2 Chimeras, 1 unit of 6 Bulgrin, 1 unit of 3 Bulgrin, 3 units of Kazarkin, not 4, just 3 into Kazarkin, 1 unit of Aquilons, a Luminous Exterminator, and a Scout Sentinel. So the most interesting thing about this list is, so there's 2 interesting things. The first one, of course, he's got the 9 Bulgrin loadout once again, which I think it was Neil, but it might have been someone else. This is the second time I've seen it in having decent results in relatively recent history. And the other really interesting thing to me about this list is it has Ursula Creed without access to a Cadian command squad. Now, one of the big things about the command squad is having the range for the orders is way more important if you have like big bricks of things that are not being led and are not in transport. So this is one where, like, what is Ursula Creed going to be ordering? The Cadians, maybe the Catachan once, maybe the Scout Sentinel. It's not as important to have the Cadian Command Squad when you don't have something like the 20 Death Corps of Krieg that's going to be like, if Ursula Creed is spending a lot of the game parked on your home objective and you need the 24-inch order range in order to order things on your natural objective, having Ursula Creed have that Cadian Command Squad is a lot more important. But in a list like this, you can actually just cut it because you don't need the ability. And so Ursula Creed probably running around. I would not be surprised if Ursula started in a Chimera in some games or attached to the Cadians if there was indirect on the other side of the board, just in order to get her into good places to use the Aura of the Free Strat. But other than that, pretty normal looking list. Trading some like shooting power and extra bodies in my list for the 9 Bulgrin that we do have here. Next we have Benjamin I think it's Haivunen. Who was it? There was a Austrian player who was talking to me about this recently. I think it's like something like that. Sorry, Benjamin, if I'm butchering it. This one is a little bit interesting because it did not go X and 1, but my benchmark is, of course, 75% win rate, with draws counting as half a win. So this is a 3 wins, no losses, and 2 draws coming up from Benjamin at Fantasia Fanatic. Not going to be a podium finish here, but it is a lot of normal stuff once again. Gaunt's Ghost, Tempestus Command Squad, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, Sly Marbo, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 2 units of 10 Catachan, 2 Chimeras, 1 unit of 5 Scions, 1 Hellhound, 2 Leman Russ Battle Tanks, 1 Leman Russ Executioner, and 2 Scout Sentinels. So overall, I mean, this is a pretty normal looking guard list as well. You're trading a little bit of the midboard brawling power and what I call the midboard in tanks for the tanks in midboard, right? It's just a spectrum of like how much firepower you want versus how much just nonsense you want to put in the middle. I, in general, find that it is having more things that play the midboard gives you, it's less brittle, by which I mean it is less prone to catastrophic failure, right? If you just have a lot of stuff that is playing the midboard, you have a lot of models to move around, you have a lot of tools, you have a lot of ways to just beat your opponent on skill expression, whereas the more tanks you put in, it tends to be a little bit more of a shootout. One of the big things I do want to point out about this list, I have an entire video on this if you're ever interested in it. Heavy bolters, Leman Russ battle tanks. No, don't do it. Put multi-meltas or plasma cannons if you really want to be hipster about it. Not heavy bolters. Do not put heavy bolters in the Leman Russ battle tanks. I'm very confident looking at the matchups that Benjamin had that he would have done better with the multi-meltas. The multi-meltas, it's not a choice. Do not put heavy bolters on any of your Leman Russes or your Rogaldorns. It's not good. It doesn't do any damage. Even if you're shooting at like Marines, there's like 2 things. It's like 6 up save infantry, so like your cultists, and like swarms, right? Things like Nurglings, and that's really about it in terms of things that the heavy bolters on your Leman Russes are going to do more damage into. Even into Marines, when you're not in melter range, the multi-meltas are going to do more damage into these targets on average. So there's really basically no reason to ever put a heavy bolter on a Leman Russ. Anyway, 3 wins, 2 draws coming up from Benjamin. Otherwise, very normal stuff. The Executioner is a little bit interesting, but it is just a way to save a couple of points on a tank if you really want to. I would probably have just taken other things instead, but that kind of goes back to that, where on the spectrum do you want to be between tanks and midboard versus midboard and tanks. And 3 wins and 2 draws coming up from Benjamin still gets him a spot on this video. Next, we have Patrick Binoki. I'm not sure how to do the O with an apostrophe. over it. He did not go 3-0-2. He actually went 4-1. Am I going to edit it on the fly? No, I'm not going to edit it on the fly. Patrick actually fooled me really heavily looking at his list title because his list title said Super Heavy Hammer of the Emperor, but it was neither Hammer of the Emperor detachment, nor did it have a Super Heavy in it. Instead, it was a very different style of a Dorns and Vanquishers and Bulgrin. Would not be like it's not too unusual to see like 2 Rogaldorn Commanders and 3 Vanquishers as a very common style. But this time around, it was Patrick going for 2 Rogaldorn Battle Tanks supported by Lord Solar, and then the 2 Luminous Vanquishers, and then 12 Bulgrin here. Of note, both the units of 6 Bulgrin had 5 of them with the 4-up Invul Brute Shields, and 1 of them with the extra wound Slab Shield. You can do this. I think it's probably technically better to have the 1 Slab Shield, depending on like what kind of meta, but it's such a 6 of one, half dozen of another that like sure you can do it. It's a very, very minor optimization that will not come up. Like when it comes up, it still doesn't matter very much. Anyway, it's got a lot of the fairly normal stuff, but the big thing that I remember thinking when I looked at this list was, wait, is that it? Is there more? Because it is a really low activation count list. You have 2 Rogaldorn Battle Tanks, 2 Vanquishers, Kazarkin, 2 units of Bulgrin, Torox, Krieg, Catachan, Cadians, and then God's Ghost. So you're only at 12 activations, which is like the same number of activations as like a lot of night lists, which is relatively low overall. So it's very brittle is the big thing that I'm going to look at here. Again, it is very prone to, if it's going to fail, it is likely to fail spectacularly. And if your opponent has the tools necessary to actually kill the Bulgrin effectively and then get into the tanks, there's not a lot of fallback, or there's not really like a plan B for this army. But the good thing about it is it doesn't need a plan B because there's not a lot of things that can actually deal with this particularly effectively. It is interesting. I'm not super fond of the Solar plus the 2 normal battle tanks. I'm generally a pretty big proponent of the 2 Rogaldorn Commanders and Ursula Creed, and the big reason for this is what the Rogaldorn Commander ability says. It's 1 hit, 1 wound, and 1 damage reroll. What it actually says is your first hit, or your first non-lethal hit, is actually 2 hits, and you're shooting a 5th shot, right? So in the situation, because you're rolling 4 shots on 3-ups. If you miss one of them and just re-roll a hit on your Melta shot, that's basically shooting 5 shots. And then if you don't wound with one of them and you get to re-roll it, your first hit gets to re-roll, so you're basically getting an extra hit that way. So in practice, what the 1 hit, 1 wound, and 1 damage actually says is you're shooting like 5.5, maybe 6, like Melta shots with lethal hits, which is super, super good. You're basically adding an extra multi-Melta to your Rogaldorn Commander in every matchup. And then there are a lot of there are some matchups where the blank from the Rogaldorn Battle Tank does matter. Like if you're playing against a lot of Tau, or you're playing up against like, if you're getting the like Knight Castellan with the D6+8 Volcano Lance, or you're playing up against something that has like those really big single attacks, the Rogaldorn Battle Tank ability is good there, but it's very, very meta dependent. And then I also really like Ursula Creed over the Lord Solar. Lord Solar does do more on the board, especially later on in the game when you're starting to run him around, because he does have 6 Power Fist attacks, and then he moves pretty fast, so you actually get some relatively good charges off of Lord Solar later in the game. However, you don't get as much command points from Lord Solar as you do from Ursula Creed, because not only as long as you're using your free strat every battle round from Ursula Creed, you are getting the same number of CP as Lord Solar, but you also get 2.5 extra CP, sometimes more, because you're getting your Voxcaster rolls. So having access to the free Fields of Fire and then also sometimes getting paid for it at the same time generally means to me that while the 2 Rogaldorn Commanders plus Ursula Creed costs, I think it's 10 points more than 2 Rogaldorn Battle Tanks on Lord Solar, I'm a pretty big proponent that the like extra 10 points there is usually worth more. That said, it's again like if people like the Lord Solar and the two World War Battle tanks, it's still good enough, right, to do a lot of the different things that you want to do. And there are going to be sub metas where you are going to have a lot of extra power because you do have those blanks in your Rogel Thorns. Next we have. Oh, I didn't update anybody's scores. All right, we have Neil Bryant. Let me double check real quick what his actual score was, because I guess I just got lazy when I was making this. I don't want to give you guys the wrong information. Don't worry, I'm still here. Neil Bryant also went 4-1. Oh, Patrick, hold on. Patrick not only didn't go 4-1, he ended up going 5-0 undefeated at his event at the Alba GT, getting second on tiebreakers. Neil Bryant went 4-1, also getting second place at the Outriders, a relatively small event. And this one is also one of those that is pretty normal looking stuff. We have a Cadian Command Squad, Gaunt's Ghost, 2 Rogel Commanders, Sly Marbo, 1 Engine Seer, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 2 units of 10 Krieg, 1 Chimera, 1 unit of 6 Bulgrin, 1 unit of Aquilons, 2 Luminous Exterminators, and 3 Scout Sentinels. So this is kind of like a hybrid of a lot of other like combined arms lists. The big thing here that we are not seeing is typically you would see almost all like top guard players going with 3 units of Kazarkin before we would really even consider looking at like individual 10 mans of Krieg, especially in combined arms. But that is not here. Instead, it's like Scout Sentinels and a lot of 10-man like battle line infantry, 1 unit of 6 Bulgrin, 1 unit of Aquilons. So it's got like all the tools that you would oftentimes see in other combined arms lists, but it's missing a lot of like the midboard brawling power that the Kazarkin and Chimeras have. Instead, you just have a lot more OC because the Krieg and the Catachan can be 2 up to 3, and the Bulgrin do give you some tools to just like fight some melee blockades, and then you do have a fair amount of damage between the 2 Rogel Commanders and the Luminous Exterminator. I'm not sure what the rationale for Neil was for teching in Sly Marbo here. I told you what mine was. I would not be surprised if it was a similar game plan coming out from Sly Marbo, something about the mission pack implying that having that little extra loan up to stand on objectives, probably something that is going to be pretty relevant here in this game. But otherwise, this is pretty normal stuff. No Ursula Creed, no Lord Solar. Does mean this is a little bit strapped for command points later on in the game, but ultimately it still does everything pretty well. Still ends up getting a 4-1 here for Neil. Okay, next we have Matt Vince, who I believe is in my Discord. So if there's a Matt V in my Discord, I can never remember which one he is because there's a couple Matt Vs that run around in different places. But this one and the next list were both at the Cross-Sword Wars over in the UK, and I believe it was on the UK terrain. This is fairly normal. It's kind of like it's we've seen this archetype starting to grow a little bit with the Cadian Castellan and the Bulgrin. I call it a Gustavo Bulgrin hybrid, but it is, you know, if you want to call it something else, the big defining features of this are the 2 Rogel Commanders, the 3 units of Kazarkin, the 2 units of 6 Bulgrin, and then the Cadian Castellan brick. So it's a Cadian Castellan with a Cadian Command Squad, a Catachan Command Squad, and an Ogren Bodyguard. The Ogren Bodyguard had a Ripper Gun, which means that it's probably going with the Catachan Command Squad, but it's also the same thing that you could do that we oftentimes find ourselves putting in the Cadian Castellan brick that Gustavo likes. 2 Rogel Commanders, 1 unit of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 2 Chimeras and a Taurox, 2 units of 6 Bulgrin, and 3 Kazarkin. So typically, I'm imagining most often it's going to be the Cadian Castellan, the Cadian Command Squad, and then the 20 Cadians as one set, the Catachan Command Squad and the Ogren Bodyguard as another set, and then the Kazarkin are all going in the 3 trucks. However, there are a couple of different choices that you do have available. You could put the Catachan Command Squad with the 10 Catachan if the Scout and the Assault is particularly relevant in a given matchup. I can't imagine what you would be doing for or what you would be looking for. Maybe there's some like specific measurements on UKTC where the Assault with the Catachan Flamers becomes particularly relevant. And you can also put the Catachan in one of the transports if you want some of the, if you want to have the extra reach of the OC for the Catachan. Otherwise, Matt Vince coming out with a 4-1 with a relatively normal hybrid, or one of the new hybrid archetypes that we have been seeing. Only loss here was to Orcs, but overall going 4-1. Another player at the same event, and this is one of the lists that I took a look at and was like, yes, I think this guy is bored. Not necessarily of the game in general, but feeling like there's not a lot of innovation happening in the Guard Codex right now, which I can understand. But going with something very new. Ricky Kellen, another player that has shown up many, many times throughout the course of the length of the spreadsheet, throughout the life of the spreadsheet, going 4-1 at Cross Sword Wars with Hammer the Emperor. And we'll get right into it because Gaunt's Ghost, 3 Rogaldorn Commanders, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 3 units of 6 Ogren, 2 Hellhounds, and 2 Lemurus Exterminators. So, when I first looked at this, again, I had another thought of like, wait, that's not a lot of things. You have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 7 of them are tanks, and 2 or 3 of them are 6-man Ogren. So one of the interesting things about this, of course, is the ability to pump up the Ogren shooting pretty heavily with the Lemurus Exterminators, so you can get the they start off as AP1, default on their guns. If they're shooting at the closest target, they get a bonus AP as part of their ability, and then you can get them up to AP3 with the Lemurus Exterminator, and then you can give them Ignores Cover with the Hellhound. So suddenly, each unit here is putting out 36. They're basically heavy bolter shots, hitting on 4s that can be up to AP3 ignoring cover, which is really funny. It's hard for me to evaluate how good this is, especially since on the UKTC I don't really know how the measurements work. The guns aren't assaults, and Ogren are fairly slow, but they are relatively durable, right? They are still toughness 6 with a 5-up save and 6-up feel no pain and 3 wounds. So it does take like real firepower to actually kill this unit. My only real concern kind of looking at this is, can the Ogren get to the positions that they need to? And it looks like Ricky has figured that out well enough to go 4-1 at Crossword Wars. Other than that, it's mostly durability skew. This is fairly similar, right? If you just took out the 3 units of Ogren, who I believe are each 120 points, and put in 3 Vanquishers, we are very quickly approaching Nick Gigello's list in terms of what he's actually just like putting a pile of tanks. So really interesting stuff here. This list is very not subtle. It is here to fight you. It is here to try and kill you, and then hopefully score points in the back half because you did not kill it back. So really interesting stuff coming out from Ricky. And next we're going to take a look at the Hobart GT, and where we're going to start looking at some really interesting things coming out. So this one was Blake Jones, a name that I don't believe I have encountered before. And we'll get right into it because it ends off in a fairly interesting way. We have Gaunt's Ghost, Lord Solar, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, an Engine Seer, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, and a Baneblade, a Cyclops, a Hellhound, 3 Scout Sentinels, a Chimera, and a Taurox. Now, this does have all the prerequisite things that you would expect in a super heavy list. I mean, you obviously have the super heavy, you have Lord Solar, you have the Engine Seer. After that, it's a lot of really, really efficient individual units between the Rough Riders, the Catachan, the Chimera, and the Taurox. Sorry if you guys can hear the dog barking. And then a Hellhound. It's not exactly how I would go about building a super heavy list, but it did well enough, right? It went 4-1. The big thing about this, so I will, before I say anything further, one of the big things that a lot of people don't necessarily realize if they haven't won a GT before, haven't made a final table before, there's a lot of luck that goes into winning a GT. There are going to be better matchups and worse matchups. Sometimes other players who are likely to make the podium just don't make it. They just lose early, and so you don't have to play them later in the event. And this is definitely one where I feel like Blake Jones kind of hit a bunch of matchups in a row that couldn't really kill a Baneblade. Between CSM, Death Guard, Tyranids, and Emperor's Children, a lot of those have a lot of trouble killing like Lehman Russes or Rogaldorans in the first place, and so having a Baneblade that just puts out a ton of shots all at once and can kind of just shoot them on open boards makes a lot of sense. They tend to be relatively good matchups for us in the first place, so the fact that Blake Jones is able to make the Baneblade work into those matchups is not particularly surprising to me. He did end up losing in his 5th round up against Raven Guard, but the Baneblade, this is the second or third time I believe we've had a super heavy actually make a top tables, make the 4-1, and so I think it's only a matter of time before we see a super heavy win a GT, especially if Games Workshop keeps giving us small buffs. Okay, next we have a couple of interesting ones. The first one is Scott McCutcheon at the Celtic Cup, going 5-1 and only losing in the finals to Innes Wilson. I believe it was on stream. I don't remember what stream it was on though, but I do remember being told it was on a stream. And this is very similar. This is pretty much the exact version of what I've been calling like the Gustavo Bolgren hybrid. You have a Kading Castellan, Kading Command Squad with a Death Mask, Catachan Command Squad, Ogre and Bodyguard, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 1 unit of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 2 units of 10 Catachan, 2 Chimeras, 2 units of 6 Bolgren, and 3 Kazarkin. So, it's got the 12 Bolgren, it's got the 3 Kazarkin, it's got the 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, you got the Castellan brick, and then after that you kind of fill in with the last bits of things that you want. This has proven to be very effective on UKTC terrain and on WTC terrain. It has shown some effect. It's shown to be relatively effective on Games Workshop as well. So I think it's probably only a matter of time before you see even more widespread adoption and even more top players doing well with this style of list. So Scott doing very well overall. Like I said, only losing in the finals to Innes Wilson, one of the best players over in Scotland, and looking good. Next, we have a very different style of list coming out from Jeffrey Kolodner. And you'll notice Jeffrey, 1983.5 rated player. That puts him very, very high, like top 0.25% of players overall. And it's a very different list. Now, one of the big things and why we don't see Jeffrey Kolodner show up on this stream or this YouTube or the spreadsheet very often is because he's normally a Sisters player. I don't think I've seen him play anything other than Sisters since I've been paying attention to his name. I don't follow him super closely, but he is a Sisters player. And it's a very different look, and this is one of the things that I think is always interesting when you see people move from one faction to a new faction. They typically don't have the same presumptions about the army that people who have been playing it for a while have, or people who are part of the a given faction's community. Well, they generally don't have the assumptions about the army that other people do. So getting into it, Lord Solar, Cadian Command Squad, 10 Cadians, 3 units of Kazarkin, 1 unit of 5 Ratlings, 1 unit of Aquilons, 3 units of 5 Rough Riders, 1 Basilisk, 1 Hellhound, 1 Lehman Russ Battle Tank, 1 Rogaldorn Battle Tank, 2 Scout Sentinels, 2 Chimeras, and a Taurox. Now, one of the first things I thought when I took a look at this is, wow, that is a lot of stuff. Excuse me, you have 3 Transports, 2 Scout Sentinels, Rogaldorn, Lehman Russ, Hellhound, Basilisk, 3 Rough Riders, Aquilons, Ratlings, 3 Kazarkin, and then the Lord Solar Blob gives you a unit count of 18, which is very high. And the Basilisk, I'm normally not a big fan of indirect in general, but having the Basilisk able to stand on your home objective does free up the Lord Solar Brick to actually move out. I would not be surprised if Jeffrey was spending most games putting Lord Solar and his unit of Cadians on his natural relatively early on. One of the things that Lord Solar does allow you to do is on a lot of different deployments, and depending on your terrain, you can string out the Cadian unit, stick your home on turn 1, and then move to touch your natural objective on turn 1 as well, and try and stick it going into turn 2. So there's a lot of play there, and then you just have a lot of mid-board brawling tools. 3 units of Kazarkin, 3 transports, 5 Ratlings, 3 units of Rough Riders. Aquilons kind of fall into that, but you just have a lot of ability to brawl for the mid-board. The big thing about this is it will struggle a little bit into damage checks. It's not going to be like super tough to play into the damage checks, but it is. You have to be very careful with what you're actually going to be just trying to throw out. It doesn't have the raw firepower that a lot of other guard lists generally have. Because most of your damage, or like most of your long range damage, is one Luminous Battle Tank, and we all know how ineffective it can be with the AP1 main gun at long range. And then the Rogodoran battle tank, which again is a tank that prefers to be playing at around the 18 to 24-inch range when it is actually shooting. So it is a very different style on guard coming out from Jeffrey. I'm not sure. I mean, this looks very similar to a lot of like sisters styles of lists where you just have a lot of cheap, like relatively cheap stuff just brawling and fueling things for later. The downside here is we don't have miracle dice in guards. I'm actually really curious to see how it would play later on. Okay, last list I'm going to show you today at the Canis Belli War. Hammer of the Emperor Florian Sauter, or Sauter, coming in for a 5-0 first place finish at a really large GT over in Germany, and he won in the last round against William Furryman, who is a Swiss WTC player, another very, very strong player overall. And this is a really interesting list. If anybody knows Florian, I would love to have him on the channel to talk a little bit about a couple of the decisions. Let's go ahead and get into the list before we talk about it. Gaunt's Ghost, a Krieg Command Squad, 2 Rogothorn Commanders, 2 Engine Seers, 1 EM10 Cadians, 1 EM10 Catachan, 1 Chimera, 1 Taurox, 5 Rough Riders, 5 Krieg Engineers, 2 Hellhounds, 1 Luminous Punisher, 2 Luminous Vanquishers, and 1 Scout Sentinel. Okay, my first thought about this is if you change the Punisher to a Vanquisher and you drop the Krieg Command Squad and turn it into almost anything else, this is a very similar list of things that Patrick Greatbatch and Nick Giello have been playing up in Canada in terms of Hammer of the Emperor, just Dorans, Vanquishers, and then some midboard stuff, right? However, the Punisher is a tank that a lot of guard players generally consider to be pretty bad. The Leonrus Punisher tank, 20 shots at 501 with dev wounds against infantry just means that you're not doing very much damage. You're only going to be killing like maybe 2 Marines with the main gun. However, if this is like a tool to try and fight up against like tight angles, like if you give it 3 flamers and you're trying to play up against like elves or orcs or something, where you do have the ability to get up relatively close and not really care about losing the tank because it is, it is still just a relatively cheap Lehman Russ chassis. I would not be surprised if that's what the goal is. But the other one that I thought was really surprising was the Krieg Command Squad. I did learn, actually, when I was doing a little bit of research for this, that you can attach the Krieg Command Squad to the Krieg Engineers. But that doesn't sound very good in my head because you lose the Scout, and they're almost definitely going to be going into one of the transports here. And so the transport doesn't go as fast. You don't have like a ton of super heavy value coming out from the Krieg Command Squad. You can, like, once per game give a second order, but you don't have anything in this army that is, like, super desperate for orders, like the Rough Riders, maybe you want the orders for, but you can also do that with Gaunt's Ghost a lot of the time. So there's a lot of, like, small things about this that make me raise their eyebrows. However, he was very successful. He got, like, because they were using WTC scoring for singles, he got like 320s, and then I don't think any of his games were particularly close, or like maybe one of them was close, but it was a lot of big blowouts, several of them into pretty strong players overall. The general idea here is, of course, you can use those transports, you can use the engineers, the Rough Riders, the Catachan in order to deny some primary, and then anything that comes out to deal with you, you shoot them, because you got a lot of firepower coming out from the 2 Rogothorn Commanders, the 2 Vanquishers, and then the Punishers, and then the Hellhounds as well. You just have like a lot of relatively durable things coming out from this list that Florian did have. So overall, the weekend was relatively interesting. We had 2 event wins, I believe. Florian getting a first place, I got a first place, several other top placings, several second places this last weekend, and still, even with all that, even with 11 lists going 75% win rate or better this last weekend. Unfortunately, still being below 50% does mean that we still have a lot of players not doing quite as well. Anyway, thank you for tuning into this weekend. I think I've got some other stuff coming up. Like I said, I have another video. When I start getting a couple of games in on the Gustavo style bricks with the Cadian Command Squad and the Castellan, I will have more to say about that in the coming days. And there might be another officer training school, which is something we haven't done in a while, coming up relatively soon. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye bye.